up in Swizzle Ventures.
Yeah, absolutely. I started my career in tech. I've been a growth operator for the past 15 years. And really, what that means is I've been helping to grow startups from the very early stages for a long time. And typically, we've been working on kind of customer acquisition and revenue generation inside these companies. I started my career at one of the first mobile marketplaces in San Francisco in like 2010, which was a super exciting time in tech. The mobile phone just came out, the iPhone just came out, and developers were just starting to build apps and figuring out how this platform was going to change customer behavior forever. And I was really excited about that. Um, and I was in a couple of in-house startups for a few years. Um, and then a former coworker kind of approached me and said, "Hey, I'm going to go out on my own and build this agency. I'd like you to join." And so I did. It was called Bamboo. It was focused on early stage startups that were mobile first and focused on consumer. And we built that business for the last I helped build the business for the past 8 years or so. And over the course of 8 years, we worked with amazing companies like Uber, DoorDash, Headspace, Lemonade Health, Hotel Tonight, Turo, like a lot of early stage consumer companies that grew to be huge and either are pre-IPO now, or they're already public, or they ended up having kind of prolific exits. And over the course of that time, we built an amazing team, and continued to attract these, uh, you know, amazing consumer companies. And I think built a lot of relationships with other operators, with founders, with growth folks along the way. And we learned not only how to build the sausage of growth and how you actually get from, seed to series A, but also what good looks like at that stage. We were getting a lot of inbound from clients, and we had to choose who we were going to work with. And that was how I started evaluating companies. And so I've been evaluating companies from the client perspective for 10 years or so. Um, and, if we worked with, let's say, 100, companies over the course of the 8 years I was there, and 10 or 12 of them became unicorns, that's about the same 10%, let's say, that's about the same hit rate that VCs have in investing into unicorn companies that end up exiting for over $1 billion. So it was kind of an interesting parallel there. And
Yeah.
eventually we decided that we should try investing ourselves. And we ended up investing off our balance sheet at Bamboo. That's how I got started. We did a few deals between, 2019 and 2021, before the pandemic kind of made us shy away from that. Um, but that's how I got started on the venture side.
That's such an impressive story, because you are kind of like the back end of why some billion dollar consumer companies became billion dollar companies, because we all know, tech startup entrepreneurs, founders, and investors, we all know that marketing strategy and growth is the the biggest reason why unicorns become unicorns, especially if it's consumer products. And you did a great job there. And have you ever, because that's the first thing I wondered when we first met, have you ever, um, even when working with those companies, have you ever thought like, damn, I wish I invested in them before, we even started working with them years ago? Because I guess there is kind of like the kind of like um, uh, a pain point, personal pain point as well.
Oh,
Of I
yeah.
believe there is a personal pain point of you that's one of the reasons why you became a VC, probably, because there must be a point where you're like, damn, we're just so good at this, and we made these companies billion-dollar companies. I wish I have invested in them.
Absolutely. We had the purview of seeing these companies and seeing under the hood and the inside of them, which typically investors don't get that kind of access. Um, but we were like in the inner workings, and we saw all of their growth data, all of their user data. And so we had a pretty good idea when we started working with these companies whether they had what I'll call sustainable growth metrics or not. And you really need that to be able to grow to a size that you do end up going public. Um, so pretty early on, we learned how to diligence companies at that early stage. And so many of them, like, for example, the first time we worked with DoorDash, they were, I think, 30 people, and their office was like in a trailer in Palo Alto. So, like, yes, I wish I had invested in DoorDash at that time. um, but that wasn't the business that we were in at that time.
Yeah, yeah,
It wasn't until later that we had some hindsight and they did go public that we said, "Hey, we could probably start doing this now. Like, we are a profitable business as an agency ourselves. Let's put some, you know, let's put some chips down." And that's really how it started. And that opened my eyes to, you can, I think from a personal wealth journey perspective, like, you can work your whole life and create this amazing career. But if you are not an owner and you don't have equity in anything, you're just going to be on that treadmill forever. And
yeah.
for someone who did not come from wealth, and I don't have a backstop, um, you know, understanding how wealth actually grows from a personal perspective was important to me in this as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just this genius idea, and you're the best thing is, and that's I think one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to be part of Swizzle Ventures is because you have that very powerful background. You don't only have the words just saying, but you have the experience, and you have years and years of experience and wealth, I believe, in that marketing space and in that growth space, and you're ready to just help the founders. And I believe you will be, I mean, the founders you work with right now will be benefiting from what you have learned over the years, much more than the other companies, because now you're part of their companies. Because psychologically, it's like that's why I built NevCap, because I have students I've been helping in the business mastery program in our Nevşah Institute in the educational company, and I have seen businesses literally triple their revenue, or they increase their revenue 10 times, 20 times over the years. And I was like, damn, I just gave them all the wisdom and all the information and all the knowledge, but I'm not part of their company. And I kind of like lost my inspiration at one point at the business mastery program, just teaching, mastery tools, self mastery tools. And I was like, for me to get inspired, I think I need to be part of these companies. I think I just have to have equity so that I can stay inspired. And now
Mhm.
what changed is, with the companies we have now in NevCap, I'm like 100 times more inspired, and I help them more. So that's kind of
Absolutely.
like psychologically. I mean, it's great to help companies professionally, but now that you have equity, it's a game changer, because you're probably psychologically, even now you started feeling it, how you operate, how you think, because now you're part of the company and your brain works 10 times better. It's just an
Yep.
amazing science behind it, like human behavior.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think whenever you can align incentives in a win-win situation, then every side is going to be more invested for sure. And my
Yeah.
hope is that by us investing, and I can get into Swizzle Ventures and how that got launched in a minute, but right now as we're joining cap tables as investors into these companies at pre-seed and seed stage, my hope is that I can help founders cut some corners and not make mistakes. Because like I said, out of 100 and 100 or so companies that we worked with, 10 made it to 10 or 12 made it to be unicorns. That means that 90 did not, right? So like I've seen a lot of mistakes happen along the way too. And my hope is
Yeah.
that I can take those learnings, and apply them to these companies
Mm.
I'm investing in now to help them dodge some of those bullets along the way.
Yeah. How about before we dive into Swizzle Ventures, how about we talk a little bit about those mistakes? Like, what were the main mistakes? Because we do have a lot of founders and entrepreneurs listening to us in Europe, UK, in Middle East, and I think the moment you say they made mistakes, they're like, okay, what are those mistakes?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share more. And this is purely from a growth and marketing perspective. One of the biggest mistakes was not finding, like, pouring a lot of money into marketing and growth before they found their product market fit. I think,
Just losing.
and they're just churning out money, churning out customers. Like the best growth happens when the value created matches what customers are willing to pay for that value. So I guess that's lesson number two is the pricing was mismatched or the model was mismatched. So like for example, um, maybe there's a business model where it's better for the business to be a subscription. Like it's better to have obviously it's better to have recurring revenue. It's better for the business metrics when that can happen. But if the customer doesn't want to have a subscription, they just want to be buying this thing a one-off, and maybe they buy it once and then like 3 months down the road they run out, and so they're going to buy it again. Um, but when the business model doesn't match natural consumer behavior on how consumers want to buy or consume whatever it is, then that doesn't work either. Um, so I think it's not only getting the product market fit, like, is your product solving the right pain point the right way for the consumer? Then to dig a step deeper, is it priced correctly? Is the value being created matching the value that they are willing to pay for it? And then third, does the business model of how it's being consumed match the natural consumer behavior of how they
Mm.
want to purchase or interact with you? So
Yeah.
I would say that the mistakes that happened were one of those three,
Yeah.
foundationally. And then, moving, a little bit down the line, let's say that companies were spending. They had some type of fit. They were spending. Um, One of the biggest mishaps that we saw was that they were focusing on the wrong metrics.
Mm.
So in the early 2010s, there was money was fairly cheap. Like interest rates were low. They could raise money fairly easily from VCs. And what tended to happen is they would raise a round of capital, and then they would come to us and say, okay, light it on fire, basically, and like help us grow. Um, and they would focus solely on cost per acquisition, which was just CAC typically, um, cost to acquire a customer. And the issue with that is that when you focus solely on decreasing CAC, um, you're not focused on user quality,
Yeah.
because sometimes the most high quality users, so the users that are going to have the highest LTV, the highest user lifetime value, are not always going to be the cheapest ones. The
Yeah.
cheapest ones are going to be the one that use it
Sure.
one time
Yeah.
and churn out immediately, right?
Mhm.
So our job and a lot of, how we worked with clients were, if they had the fundamentals, if they had the product market fit, but they were just focusing on the wrong thing, then we could come in and adjust how they, like, what they were focused on and what they're optimizing for.
Mhm.
Um, and those were some of our, like, biggest successes as an agency, was
Yeah,
when we
sure.
could do that. But yeah, I hope that helps a bit.
Yeah, and there are many methods on doing that and many strategies, and yours obviously work, which is yeah, which is great. So when was the time you decided, okay, well, I'm gonna go for VC?
Yeah. Um, in 2018, my husband and I moved to Seattle from San Francisco. And the main motivation for moving is that we were trying to build a family. We are trying to have our first baby. Um, we had a hard time doing that. And just like, I think it's like 1 in 6 families are experiencing infertility. We were one of those. Um, and I experienced, it was really my first time experiencing, like, what went on from a women's health perspective
Hmm.
in trying to go through this, and just being gaslit, or like talking to providers that couldn't really give me an answer. We finally found an amazing doctor in Seattle. Science prevailed. We had our first child, and then we had our second in the middle of the pandemic. And in 2021, my husband and I were sitting there, the two babies under two. We both were leaders at companies, or, had our own businesses. Um, and in the middle of COVID in the US, and in where we live, Seattle, like, all the childcare was closed. We couldn't have a nanny, like, we couldn't have anything. So we just found ourselves with very little support. Um, and to say it was challenging was an understatement. And I think
Yeah,
it
I
that
can
was
agree.
that
Yeah.
yeah, that experience was a catalyst of me understanding how difficult it has always been for women in
Mm.
leadership to have a family,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also the lack of foundational structural support in the US specifically for families. There's no, uh, you know, no parental leave that's federally funded. There's no early childcare that's federally funded. Nothing. So families are just, like, really on their own. Um, and then I started looking into, really the reasons why this is, and the systemic reasons why this is. And that helped form the basis of this thesis. And I also realized that, many of the companies that are working on this space, and the people who are best suited to build these companies, are women, because they intimately understand the hardships and the problems that,
Mm.
women go through. Um, and I think this stat has been thrown around a lot, but only 2% of venture dollars are going to female backed companies, or female founded companies, in, worldwide right now.
Worldwide. Yeah.
So I knew that if I wanted solutions for women to advance, um, helping them grow was not going to be enough. I needed to fund them. I needed to be a check writer.
Yeah. Be
And
there for them with
yeah,
basically cash and yeah.
because money is power, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if they don't have funding, if they don't have money, they cannot grow. Um, so that was really the catalyst to take the leap, and to focus on this thesis full time. So yeah, I left the agency, and I started working on this firm about a year ago. Um, and yeah, we just closed our fund, and we've now invested in about 10 companies. So happy to, if it's helpful, happy to share a bit more about our thesis as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, I would love to hear more. Yeah, I bet our listeners are also willing to hear more. We, by the way, have some angel investors as well, some potential LPs listening. So yeah,
Amazing. Well, we can definitely stay in touch for when we start launching Fund 2. That would be
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
So Swizzle Ventures is a traditional VC firm. Our first fund is focused on advancing women's health and wealth through pivotal life stages. We believe that women should be building equal wealth over the course of their lifetime as men, but there are systemic reasons why they are not. One has to do with these pivotal life stages or points in time throughout our life that take women out of the wealth building journey. Either you downshift or you come out completely, or you have these like weird gaps that detract from wealth building. And underpinning those pivotal life stages are the three sectors that we focus on, which are women's healthcare, caregiving, both elder care and childcare, and financial health.
Yeah.
So that's the basis, and we are investing at the pre-seed and seed stage, usually into companies that are 20 million and below from a valuation perspective. And right now, we're focusing on investing in US based founders.
Hmm. Yeah, I have checked, as you know, I have checked the companies, and there are some amazing ideas and amazing companies, and especially in your decision process, I believe you look at many factors, and you probably have data analysts in your team, and you also maybe look at from a marketing and growth perspective. If I ask you, like, what are the three main things you look for, especially in a founder, also in the business, like if we said like three things, what are the first three maybe
Yeah,
founders need to master at?
yeah. Well, number one is that they are actually addressing a big problem with a solution that makes sense in these sectors and that addresses a pivotal life stage. So one is just thesis fit, right?
Hmm.
Second, from a founder perspective, we back founders that have lived experience in whatever pivotal life stage they are trying to solve for.
Hmm.
So, for example, for a women's health company, we typically would not back a male founder in that case because they have not experienced whatever it is themselves. And I think that's really important. We do back founders of all backgrounds, but that is one of our kind of criteria depending on the situation or depending on the problem that they're trying to solve. And the third has to do with growth criteria.
Hmm.
So we break that down into three pieces. One is um, TAM, basically, and is your market big enough for you to reasonably get to an exit point that matches our exit goals as a fund? Like, as a fund manager, my job is to be a fiduciary of the capital that my LPs invest with us. So if your company cannot get to the right exit price for me to return that capital, then that's I can't invest at that point. So that's check number one. Check number two is, can it get to that exit price on the timeline that we need? So funds are typically 10 years old. So by the time I invest, can you hit an exit? Can you get to that exit price within the time frame of that 10 years?
Hmm.
And how I'm judging that is on growth rate and trajectory.
Mhm.
So typically for the companies that I've seen do really well, um, we it needs to be a 30% or more month-over-month growth. So either
Mhm.
user base or revenue, depending on the stage that we are investing at, but there needs to be, like, a very clear growth trajectory, and one that's and then the third is that growth sustainable?
Yeah.
So, like we talked about before, for companies that are, they're focused on growth rate, but they're focused on that, like, CAC, or, you know, they're bringing in users that are not high quality, even if they're growing 30% month over month, it's not efficient, and they're never gonna get to that unicorn status because they're
Mhm.
gonna have users churning out, um, like, at a faster rate than they can kind of fill that bucket.
Mhm.
So, from a growth sustainability perspective, we're typically looking at holistic metrics that encapsulate growth rate, CAC, retention, and engagement. And we're usually looking at a metric called LTV to CAC ratio and payback period. Those are
Mm.
typically the two that are like encapsulating what a healthy growth will
Yeah,
look like.
sure. Yeah, so if I ask you, that's a great answer. I believe the founders have learned a lot from that answer. If we just leave the business aside, you have worked with a lot of founders and you have some experience with founders. Um, what what do you think is kind of like the common behavioral habits or daily habits or thinking behavior, the way they think behind the founders that are successful? Like, you have worked with founders who did build unicorn companies, and you probably spent personal time with them as well. And what would you say about that? It's because I strongly believe, because I'm a behavioral scientist, I strongly believe that there is a science behind why certain humans succeed and why certain humans don't. And there are certain behaviors, there are certain thinking habits, the way we think, the way we act, what we do daily on a daily base, our mindset, everything, you know, um, I think creates the journey to success. So, what would you say about that? Like, what do you see in common, especially when you look at the founders who did succeed, build unicorn companies?
Mhm. The first thing I would say is that they are relentless in testing
Yeah.
and continuous improvement.
Getting
So,
feedback, testing, getting feedback, testing, changing, transforming, and
yeah.
yeah.
And I would say it is a growth mindset.
Mhm.
So, in growth, and especially in performance growth, which is what I was in, um, the only way to get better is to test a bunch of stuff that is not going to work.
Mhm.
Or, like, you make a hypothesis and then you test it, right? And I think the best founders are constantly doing that in all facets of their business.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's in product, it's like, oh, like, um, I wonder how changing the way we structure our free trial will impact our conversion rates. So it starts by, like, having curiosity, asking a
How
question
about
in the
doing this,
pursuit.
seeing the
Yeah.
result? How about doing that, seeing the result? Yeah.
Yep, and it's all in the pursuit of continuous improvement and, like, putting one foot in front of the other.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Do you also see have you also seen it in their daily behavior and their daily lives and thinking habits? Because I strongly also think people who are daily ready to be challenged, and people who do the exact same thing in their lives do it in business as well. It's kind of like what we do it in business tells a lot about how we live our lives, and how we live our lives tells about a lot about how we do
Mhm.
business. So it's like there has to be a correlation between how those founders are in daily life and in
Yep.
business life.
I think and part of that, like, pursuit of continuous improvement and putting one foot in front of the other is consistency. So
Mhm.
they're not just doing it once, they're doing it repeatedly, and they have a routine and they build it into the routine. So one other thing that I've seen just from the now that I'm an investor, the companies that we're working with, the best founders are consistently um, sending investor updates on time. They pick the same, the same day every month, the same metrics that they report out on, and doesn't matter if things are going well or bad or whatever, but they're showing up. They're showing
Yeah,
up and they're writing the update and they are practicing transparency. Um, and that's how you get people in your corner. That's how you build trust. And that's really important. And they're doing that everywhere, right? So they're showing
yeah,
up online,
constantly. Yeah,
they are
discipline.
building in public, they are they're just showing up.
Yeah,
And I think that mindset is really important too, because founding a company is really hard. It's
yeah,
really, really hard. There's not every day is gonna be peachy, like, you're not gonna be motivated to work on your thing every single day, that's just, like, human nature, but what is it that is gonna get you out of bed and keep putting one foot in front of the other, and that's consistency,
yeah,
and just doing it and having this as a part of a routine. I think from a marketing perspective, another thing that we've seen is, um, founders are, like, not afraid to get scrappy, and they're not afraid to be the face of their own thing. And so we've seen, especially in the consumer world, like building an online community is really important. And we've seen founders that have successfully done this by becoming an influencer themselves. Um, and when you think about like, okay, you're running a full business, how the hell do you have time to like become an influencer on the side? And the answer is that they've like built it into their routines and they're like, this is a part of the business building
yeah,
journey.
yeah,
And it's my thing. And like, I have to be the face of it. Right. So,
yeah,
and they've been able to create these amazing communities, which then kind of becomes the basis of what I call a growth moat. Um, that allows them to build this foundation of for like healthy, sustainable growth.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's how I've been leading my businesses. So I totally agree. I also find similarities between professional sports and being a founder. It's kind of like the same or the similar journey. You just do the same thing over and over and over. Not the same thing, but test, do differently. But it's like a routine, doing similar things over and over and over again every day. That's how you build muscle. That's how you become successful in professional sports. It's kind of like, I think, understanding that and enjoying the routine would be one of the main successful founder traits. Enjoying the routine and being capable of just doing the routine and getting perfect at it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think as a I'm trying to remember the quote of like from the athletes, but it's like, you know, the premise is like, everything that you see on the court happens and is built in the dark, right? Is built in the
Yeah.
dark when no one's watching.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's tears and sweat. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jessica. I enjoyed every moment of our conversation, and I am certain that our listeners also did, and anyone who's watching us on live right now. Anything for us? Any updates? What's the future? What are the future plans? When is the next fund coming?
Yeah. So we just announced Fund One. So whenever this podcast launches, you can find us at swizzle.vc, and also on LinkedIn. So if you are a founder building in these spaces of women's health, caregiving, or financial health, fintech, please come talk to me. I want to meet you. And yeah, we have already invested in 10 companies out of, we will do a total of 30. So I have 20 more companies to invest in for fund one. And then after that, we'll be starting to think about fund two, probably at the tail end of 2026.
Lovely. Thank you. Congratulations and great start. Everything. I'm certain that there will be a couple of very successful founders and companies. And yeah, thanks a lot, Jessica.
And thank you so
Talk
much
to
for
you
having me. This
soon.
was fun.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks to everyone who's listening and watching us, and I'll see you in the next episode. Yeah.